Okay, so today's webinar is about the immune system, which is covering topics 2.7 and 2.8. So white blood cells are part of the second line of defense, and what they do is they produce antibodies that can destroy any harmful microorganisms such as bacteria, and they're made in the bone marrow. So there are two main types of white blood cells, which are phagocytes and lymphocytes. So phagocytes are a type of white blood cell, and they ingest or engulf pathogens, like you can see in this video here, or they release enzymes that destroy them. They are literally cleaning up the body of anything that might be harmful to the body.
Microorganisms that cause disease are called pathogens. When pathogens enter the body, white blood cells called phagocytes pass through the walls of the blood vessels and into the surrounding tissue. There they can ingest the pathogens and pathogens' toxins, absorbing and digesting them. Phagocytes can also destroy pathogens by releasing enzymes. Having absorbed a pathogen, the phagocytes may also send out chemical messages to call in other white blood cells.
So we do have other types of cells in the body that are part of what we call the innate immune system, such as our natural killer cells, and these have protein markers that recognize cells in the body that are non-self that need to be destroyed. We also have another chemical system called complement system, which is where proteins that are only activated that are bound to the surface receptors on pathogens. Now, they will kill the pathogen either by binding to it and puncturing the cell membrane, or we can get others that bind to the surface molecules and increase the chances of destruction by a macrophage.
How does the body react to a stab wound? Damaged cells release histamine, which diffuses into nearby blood capillaries, causing them to dilate and become leaky. Phagocytes are attracted to the injury site, and they move into the infected tissue along with blood plasma. The plasma causes the swelling we associate with infection, and the phagocytes engulf bacteria and dead cells. As the histamine disappears, no more phagocytes are attracted, and the tissue gradually returns to normal. The symptoms of inflammation are swelling, pain, redness, and an increased temperature.
So far, we've just covered the innate immune system in vertebrates. So I wanted to talk about invertebrates, such as your insects. So their first line of defense is the exoskeleton, which is a hard surface, usually made of chitin, and that helps to protect them in the same way that our skin helps to protect us from any form of bacteria that may want to enter our bloodstream. The second line of defense for invertebrates is they have an immune cells like we do that are called hemocytes, and they carry out phagocytosis in the same way that our phagocytes do, and they have recognition of self and non-self in the body, and they help to then bind to the molecules of the pathogens, which helps to then be able to destroy them. So plants also have an innate immune system as well, and their first line of defense is that they have barriers and protective layers. So they have waxy cuticles that offers a waterproof layer that makes entry for bacteria and fungi really difficult. They also have bark as well that is like a hard protection, like the same way that we have our skin. And they also have leaves that have hair-like structures on them that helps protect against insects and bacteria, because you can't really have an insect crawling along this structure here because there's nowhere for it to really grab a hold of because of the hairs. They do have a second line of defense, which is your chemical warfare. So caffeine that you get in coffee, tannins, which you would normally find in wine, and cocoa are all used for plants really as a antimicrobial or antifungal agent. and we just happen to use it for other purposes. So we're now moving on to what we call the adaptive immune system. Now, this is what we call the third line of defense, and what the adaptive immune system does is, like the name suggests, it is adaptive. It does operate with quite a large number of specificity, and it also retains memory as well. So the adaptive immune system can recognize specific pathogens, and they're able to bind and detect those between other pathogens. And again, about this retaining memory, what it does is it actually retains memory of how to respond to an infection if it were to occur again, so that the response time is a lot quicker. So the immune system is a system that is part, or the organs that is part of this adaptive response, and it's called the lymphatic system. And it consists of a network of vessels that move around the body that are very close to the capillary system, which is really important if you're wanting to transport your anything that might want to help with the immune system around the body. So your lymph nodes, which occur here, and also you would have, if you've ever been sick before, you've got your lymph nodes under your jaw that may have become swollen, and they contain blood or white blood cells that are part of the defense against the pathogens that may enter your body. So there are primary and secondary organs that are responsible for the immune system. We have what are called our primary organs, which is where the lymphocyte actually develops, which is either in our bone marrow, which is where B cells are made, or it's in our thymus gland, which is where T cells are made. And then we have our secondary organs, which include our lymph nodes, our spleen, and our tonsils, which are up here. And they are where the white blood cells recognize the pathogens and actually mount their defense in response to that bacteria or foreign agent, in this case, a pathogen. So we have a response called a major histocompatibility complex. And what this does is it has proteins on the outside of a body cell, and those can then engulf and put out the processed antigen on the side so that it can be recognized. And this can help with engulfing of foreign agents, in this case pathogens, by macrophages. So we also have your lymphocytes, and these carry antibodies that destroy the antigens, which are the foreign substances, by binding to them. So they damage and destroy the pathogen, they coat the pathogen, clumping them together so they can be ingested easily by the phagocytes, and they release chemical signals that help to attract the more phagocytes. So we've got a phagocyte that is engulfing your bacteria, and this is your lymphocyte, which helped to make that response possible. So we can see here's our receptors, and then we've got chemicals that are being released by the lymphocyte that then attracts your phagocytes, which then come to engulf the invading pathogen.
Invading pathogens can be identified by antigen chemicals on their surface. Lymphocytes are white blood cells that carry antibodies, some of which will fit the antigens. These lymphocytes reproduce rapidly, and many copies of the appropriate antibody are produced. Antibodies can destroy pathogens directly, or make it possible for the phagocytes, the other white blood cells, to ingest and destroy the pathogens.
So another type of lymphocyte that we have, which is a type of T lymphocyte, is what we call memory cells. And these are cells that, after you have an attack on the body, some of the T lymphocytes will become memory cells. And their purpose is to allow the body to respond quickly with the correct antibody should the same infection occur again. So just in terms of a few words that we've been using, so your pathogen is your chemical that is foreign and is called an antigen. and this stimulates a production of antibodies. So a lymphocyte can produce a specific type of antibody, and that is a protein that has a chemical fit, so usually a structure that is complementary to the antigen. And think of it is like a lock and key system. So our antibodies, they bind to the pathogens and help to destroy them or damage them. They could either coat the pathogen as well, that clumps them together to make it easier for the phagocyte to come along and digest them, or they can bind to the pathogen and release more chemical signals to attract the phagocytes, which we saw in the video before. So this is what our antigen looks like, and so our antigens are these guys up here. They all have different shapes, as you can see. And then we have our antibody, which you can see has a complementary shape to the shape of the antigen, so that the antibody is able to recognize a specific antigen, as all antigens have different shapes. So this is just a summary of how lymphocytes work. So we have our B cells, which are our B lymphocytes, and they find an antigen that matches its receptor. It then waits until it's activated by a helper T cell, and then we have B cells that divide to produce more plasma and memory cells. So the plasma cells, what they do is they release antibodies that help to attach to the current bacteria or invader. The phagocyte then recognizes the antibodies on the invader and they can then ingest them. And the memory cells that we talked about up here, they then know that if the same intruder were to invade again, the memory cells will be able to activate the immune system response faster to make the response quicker.